Okay, so we're going to click on projects, and we're going to go ahead and go to new. We're going to click on architectural template, hit OK. We'll let this upload. All right, we have our new project. Let's go ahead and save this to our thumb drive right away. Let's save this as our new. Actually, my thumb drive is currently uploading that last video to YouTube, so I'll save it to my desktop for now. Go ahead and call this Villa Savoye. Okay, let's go ahead and save that. Let's go to Canvas and let's download our different files. So we're going to go over to Files, Villa Savoye, and I'm going to start by downloading the floor plans. So I'm going to go ahead and download the ground floor for now. That's all I need for this particular moment. Okay, so we're going to download the ground floor floor plan. I'm just going to put this on my desktop for now. All right, we're going to go ahead and open Revit back up. And let's look at how we're going to bring in our CAD files for reference, okay? So we're going to go ahead and go over to Insert. And we're going to have a variety of different options of ways we can insert different items, okay? You're going to notice Link Revit. So should you have maybe another Revit file that you want to join, which is very typical. So for example, if my office is doing a like when we did the outlet mall in Livermore, we actually had a master file that had 10 other buildings all linked into. So we had 10 separate building files all linked into a master file. So if you wanted to go that approach, you're not going to need to do this for this class, but should you want to have multiple Revit files combined, you do have that option. Okay. So what we're going to use today is we're going to use the link CAD or import CAD file. All right. The difference between the two, and I prefer the link. The difference between the two is if you link your CAD files in, and let's say later on down the road you make some changes to those CAD files, you can go up to your links and you can refresh it, and you can continue to see those updates that you've made in the CAD file. So that works generally pretty well as if I'm maybe modeling something in Revit in my office and maybe I have somebody else that's doing like CAD plans, maybe doing some CAD floor plans. That's a good way to kind of consistently update the work. In this class, you could probably do just import CAD, but the difference between the two is that you can't refresh this, okay? This is simply a reference, all right? You're not gonna go through and make any changes to the CAD files is my guess. So either of these will work just fine. Okay, so I'm going to click on Link CAD, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the ground floor plan. And let's look at some of the options that we have below at the bottom. You'll notice one option is to preserve the colors. I don't really want to see all of the different colored line work of the CAD file. Okay, black and white is okay with me. All of the different layers mean nothing to me in Revit. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change this to black and white. Layers, levels, all, that's okay. You can go ahead and leave all of the rest of this as is. Notice that you have an option here to place at level 1. So remember when we were working on our residence file, you had model lines and you had annotative lines. Okay, so the model lines were actual lines that you could see in 3 dimensions. Okay, if you drew a line, it actually showed up in all of your views, just like just like a component might. Okay, so one of the options for placing a CAD file is where do you want to place that CAD file? Okay, we've only created level 1 at this point. We'll create the other different levels in just a second, but we do want this CAD file to be at the first level. Okay, when you import the second level, you're going to want to import it at the level that it's supposed to be at. Okay, so you can actually put CAD files at multiple different levels in your project. Okay, so this looks good. Position, I'm going to go ahead and do auto is fine. If you want to place it in a location of your choice, like you actually want to physically position it, you could click on manual below. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and click on auto. That will be just fine. And we're going to go ahead and hit open. Okay, so here's our CAD file. Notice that all of our lines are black and white. All right, so you can see all of our interior partitions, you can see all of our exterior partitions, you can see where our storefront is. This is going to be your storefront all around here. You have your interior partitions, etc. So you can see a floor plan, you can see where all of your grids are. This will supply us with all of the information that we need to proceed, okay? So before we proceed with placing columns and adding our grids, let's download one of our elevations so that we can see where our levels should be, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and download, any one of them will work. I'm just gonna download the north elevation. And let's open this in CAD. So I'm gonna open up CAD 2017. And I'll just show you a couple just very basic things for those that don't know CAD. That's okay. We're not going to be editing these files at all. We're only using them as reference, okay? So I'll just show you guys how to use the ruler tool. That's pretty much all you're going to need to know. All right, so we just opened up CAD. We're going to go to File, Open, Drawing, and we're going to go to Desktop, select that northeast elevation. Okay, so here's our northeast elevation. Let's see, where are my levels? They're not in here. Okay, never mind. Let's look at the PDF instead. I thought the levels were on there. They may be on some of the other CAD files, but I'm not going to spend a bunch of time looking at them. Okay, so here's one of my example PDFs. Okay, so if you scroll into here, you can see where all of the levels that you need to create are. Okay, so we're going to create a ground floor, a floor 1, a floor 2, and a parapet. All right, so let's create a couple of those different levels. I'm going to go back to my Revit file. I'm going to go over to any of my elevations is fine. Okay, right now we have level 1 and level 2. I'm going to change some of these names to correspond with the CAD files that I have. So I'm going to change this to ground floor. Yes, would you like to rename the corresponding views? By selecting yes, that will change the names of the views over in my project browser. Okay, so floor 1 is going to be 10 feet 8 inches. So I'm going to change this to floor, and we'll just call this level 1. All right, so we change that to level 1. Yes to corresponding views. I'm going to change this to 10 feet 8 inches. Okay, and let's create our level 2, which is going to be at 21 3 3/4. All right, so I'm going to go to Architecture, click on Levels, and I'm just going to go ahead and draw it in. Well, that was a pretty good just guess. Well, let's see. We want to put it on 21 3 3/4. Okay, so we'll change this to 21 feet 3.75 inches. Okay, so that's going to be our level 2, and let's go ahead and create one more level, parapet, which is going to be 30 feet 11 7/8 of an inch. For simplicity, I'm going to do 31 feet. That's kind of ridiculous. Nobody would ever do that. So 31 feet. All right, so level. All right, we're going to call this parapet. Yes, and we're going to call this, what did we say?
31 feet.
31 feet. All right, so we'll change this to 31 feet. Okay, so now we have all of our levels. All right, that's going to allow us to proceed. That will allow us to import other CAD files to our plan. Okay, if we look at this in 3D, one of the nice things about importing the CAD files is that you can see it both in plan and you can see it in 3D. Okay. All right, so there's going to be our first plan. So the next step is going to be to establish our grids, okay? So if you look at let's go back up to our floor plan, you can kind of see the different grids that we've created. This person's actually left out a few. This should be A, B, this should be C, D. For some reason he left out those couple, but you can see he actually did create them because it's just missing them. But let's create those different lines. All right. So we're going to go back to our ground floor plan, and we're going to go up to architecture, and down at the very far hand right of your ribbon, you're going to see the button that says datum. Okay. I'm going to click on that button, grid, and we're going to go ahead and establish our first grid. Okay. So by just simply drawing it right on the edge of our building. Okay. So we're going to align it with the outside face of our building. And I'm going to select the line. I'm going to check the box at the end of the line to turn on that grid bubble. Now all of the grids on this that I'm going to create first, I want them to all be letter grids. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change this to A. All right, that'll change the other side as well. And then from here, I'm going to select that grid and I'm going to copy it to my different columns that I have below. Okay, so I'm going to copy it and I'm going to align it with the center of my column, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and align it to the center of the column. Notice that it changes it to B automatically. So whatever you change that grid numbering system or lettering system to, it'll automatically pick up on that and continue to change the others. Okay, so I'm just going to continue this all the way down the line. Copy. I can click on multiple to be able to kind of do this all in one fell swoop. That's going to be D, E, F, and G is going to be the very last one. Okay? All right, so that's going to be all of our horizontal grid, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go back over to architecture, grid, and we're going to draw one through the middle of this column here, all the way down. Okay, I'm going to extend this line all the way up to the top. So notice that our grid lines are intersecting. Okay, let's add our grid bubble up here to the top, and I'm going to change this to 1. Okay, and we're going to do the exact same thing, and we're going to copy this over to our next columns. Make sure that you actually align it with the center of the column. You should get that little triangle that's telling you that you've found the middle of that column. It might be a little tricky. Okay. All right. So we have all of our grid lines. Okay, that looked pretty good. All right, so we have all of our grid lines, and now we can proceed to adding our columns. Okay. So let's look at a couple photographs before we do that, and let's look at where we want those columns to be. Okay, if we look at, let's say, this picture here, for example, our columns, this is going to be our ground level right here. Then we have level 2 here, and then we have the parapet level up here. Now you can also, the only level that we're actually missing is going to be the top of this little structure. Okay, which I guess I didn't see it on that PDF. Let me just look one more time. Oh, okay, so the parapet is the top of the little structure, and I forgot that floor 2 is going to be our roof. But looking at these elevations, we're going to want to set our bottom constraint to ground floor, and our top constraint is going to be floor 2. Okay? And by the looks, let's see, if we go over to the CAD file and we look at it, I believe all of the columns are, I think, 8-inch columns. They could be 6-inch, let's just see. Yeah, they're 8-inch columns. All right, so we're going to go up to architecture. We're going to go to column. And, let's click on column. Let's click on architectural column, okay? And we're going to need to upload a circular column. All right, so right now by default it only gives you 3 rectilinear columns. We're going to go ahead, whoops. Why would I want to do that, Reddit? Why would I want to do that? So I'm going to go to edit type, and I'm going to go to load, and I'm going to go over to columns, and I'm going to click on round column, okay? Click on open, and I'm going to duplicate this column, and I'm going to create another option called 8-inch diameter, okay? So by default, it just gives you one that's a 6-inch. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. 8-inch diameter column. I'm going to change the diameter of this column to 8 inches. Okay. This is a good time to also add a material. Okay. You could do it later, but if I do it right now, every column that I place will be that material versus having to go back and select all of those columns at a later point. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and add a material and create a new material. I'm going to rename this as white.
It's a concrete material, is it?
No, these are actually steel.
In the Villa Savoye, is it steel or concrete?
I think it's, let's see, I'm trying to think the era that it was built. 29. They had steel at that point.
Yeah.
I think they started to have this movement of
I think they were concrete.
zinc.
I think they're concrete.
Okay, let's go with concrete. Doesn't really matter. It's painted anyways, okay? So, and we're just calling them round columns. They could be whatever material. But if you wanted to take it a step further under graphics, you could give it a cut pattern of concrete. So I haven't done the research yet. If it's concrete and you want to do that, that's okay. Okay, so you can do that. But we're going to call this white. I'm just going to call this white column. Okay, so under appearance, I'm going to go ahead and change this to white. I can add some other properties to it. So maybe we make this metallic to give it a little bit of a sheen. The only reason why this matters is when you do the final rendering is that you'll have, some nice glossy white painted columns. Okay, so I'll just leave that. Whatever it is, this is fine. We'll give it a little bit of reflectivity. Sure, just a little bit though. This isn't metallic paint, or it's not really super metallic-y. Okay, so that looks good. I could go to graphics. If I want to have a cut pattern, I could do that. All right, so maybe we make it concrete. That looks good. Okay, so we'll go ahead and hit OK. And now we have our 8-inch column. So I'm going to go ahead and start by placing the first one right on the grid. Notice that it snaps to my grid. All right, so there's my first column. And if I go over to my properties, I'm going to make my base constraint ground floor, and I'm going to make the top constraint level 2. So now all of my columns will go all the way up to the top of level 2. Okay, from here I can go ahead and copy this. I'm going to go to copy. I'm going to go ahead and click on multiple, and I can copy this column to all of our grid intersections. Now, you can't really see where all of them really are. Now, even though we have a circular column over here on the outside, you may have some smaller square columns inside of the walls, okay? So I'll let you make that determination, okay? So if you want to go back to architecture column, architectural, you could go back to the rectangular column, and maybe you duplicate this, and we'll call this 6-inch, or maybe even a little smaller, 5 by 5-inch. Okay, and the depth, we're going to go ahead and make this 5-inch, and we'll make the width 5. Okay, and we could place these columns in the wall assemblies like so. Level 2. This may not be level 2 because this is an exterior partition. So just keep in mind that a lot of the interior columns may not be all the way up to level 2. You'll have to kind of, if you see them pop up in a weird spot when you create level 2, you may have to make them go a little bit smaller. Okay? So up to you on whether or not you want to, you know what? I'll bet you there's probably not columns on the walls because they're masonry walls. I think that's correct. So I think this actually, all of the exterior wall is all masonry, which is actually can support its own load. So that's probably why you don't see a column there.
Steel needs columns to support.
Okay, up to you. If you want to add those columns, you can certainly do so. I'm just going to add the circular ones just for simplicity purposes right now. Okay, so I'm going to go through and add all of my columns to the grid line intersections. Okay, if you want to speed things up a little bit, I could select all of these and then copy them all over at one swoop. Okay, so copy. Ah, there's another grid line right over here.
Yeah.
So you'll actually need to add
The one where you want from.
one more grid line over here. Ah, there's actually another one right here too.
2 more actually.
Yeah, I missed a couple. Sorry. Okay, so we're just going to add all of our columns real quickly. I won't do all of them, but just to kind of get the process started. I think that one's supposed to go there. I think that's fine. I don't think that one goes there. We have one here. We have one up here. Let's add a couple more and then we will move on to the next step. All right, almost there, almost done. Okay, so that's good for now. I may have missed a couple. In fact, I can already see a couple that I've missed, but that should do the trick. So let's go to our 3D view. Let's see what we got. You can see here that minus probably a couple that would be over here in the back. We kind of have the basic grid system, the basic structural framing of our building. Okay, so there's going to be all of our columns, or a majority of our columns. So the next step is going to be to create our different wall assemblies. Okay. So for now, we're going to create the ground level. So let's go ahead and look at let's go look at a couple pictures. You'll notice that the ground level consists of 2 different wall assemblies. We have this exterior wall assembly that has this kind of tealish green paint on it. Okay, so that's going to be one. And you're also going to have a variety or a couple different storefront systems to take on the front. Okay, and I think there's also a couple ribbon windows in the back. Let me find a picture of the back of the space. Let's see, where are you? Okay, here's the back right here. You can see, that's a terrible picture. Let me find something a little bit better. I guess the front is the more photogenic side of this building.
Yeah. There's only one. Oh, right there.
Here we go. Okay, so here's the back of the building. You can see this actually kind of looks like louvers. Okay, it's not louvers, it's actually glass with a very tight storefront pattern. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to create probably 3 different wall types today. We're going to create one that has white paint. We're going to create one that has the green paint, and then we would create 1 or 2 different storefronts to make up the glass walls that you can see here. Okay, so let's go back to our floor plan. Okay, we're going to go to ground floor. All right, and we're going to go ahead. I'm going to click on my CAD file here, and I'm going to right click. I'm going to override graphics in view by element, and I'm going to click on halftone. Okay, the reason why I'm doing this is just to not make it quite so bold, and I also want to be able to tell the difference between the walls that I'm drawing and the walls that are in the CAD file. Okay. All right, that looks a little bit better. So from here, let's create our first wall assembly. The first one's going to be 8 inches thick. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go to wall. We're going to go to probably start with generic 8-inch. That's just fine. I'm going to go to edit type. I'm going to keep this wall. Assembly relatively simple. I'm not going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what that actually might be. Yeah, I'm just going to say that the structure is masonry. We'll leave that as 8 inches. And I'm going to create a new material. I'm going to call this, actually there might be one in here for right here, concrete masonry units. So that's going to be our structure. Okay, maybe we just make this 7 inches thick. We'll add a layer on the outside as our finish. We'll just pretend that, I don't know if there's actually gypsum wallboard on this, probably not. I think it's plaster, but we're just going to keep it relatively simple.
29 sheetrock didn't exist.
What was that?
In 1929.
No sheetrock existed.
Didn't exist.
Okay. I think it did. You're like, nope, that's a fact. It did not.
They spent a lot of time cutting up old houses.
Okay, so we're just going to call this one, I'm just going to call this white paint appearance. We're going to make this white. If you want to give it a little bit of a sheen, you can do so. White paint. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing for the inside because I will also see this wall on the interior of my house. All right. I'm going to make this 1/2 inch thick. Make the top 1/2 inch. So in total, this adds up to
8 inch.
8 inches. Okay, I'm going to make the inside white as well. Make this a finish. Okay, that should do the trick for our first wall assembly. All right, go ahead and hit OK. And let's rename this as generic 8-inch white paint. Okay, then we would duplicate this and maybe we call this one green paint. And you'd want to go through and edit your materials to get the materials that you're looking for. Okay, I'm going to start by just doing white for all of these, and then a little bit later, once you guys are working, I'll go through and I'll start to make some of those adjustments. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to go ahead and select my generic 8-inch white paint family that I just created. Okay, and if we go up to location line, we're going to go ahead and change this to core face interior, so that when core face exterior, you could use interior too as well. It wouldn't make a difference. You would just start from the other side. But I'm going to go ahead and start from this location, and I'm going to draw this wall all the way down. Oh, I see what I did. Here, I'm going to do finish face interior. Finish face exterior. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to draw this wall all the way down. All right, I'm going to go ahead and make my base constraint the ground floor. My top constraint is going to be level 1 because it's going to stop, right? All right, so that's going to be our first wall, and I'm going to go ahead and draw in my remaining walls. Okay, so maybe we start on this side. And we'll draw in all of our walls. Come on now. There we go. Okay, so that looks like all of our exterior walls. That looks good. All the rest of these are going to be, oh, we actually have a couple more tiny ones, but let's just look at this real quickly. Okay, so that looks good. Let's change all of these walls to match the constraints of our first wall. All right, so we're going to change that to level 1. Okay. And let's go back to our ground floor. We have a couple more walls that we want to build. So we want to build this little wall right here. So we can do this a couple different ways. Let's go back to our original white paint wall assembly, which I think will end up changing to green here in a little bit. But we can do this a couple ways. I can either go to my ARC, okay, and I can click on the corner like so. Click on each of the 2 corners and actually recreate that arc like so. You can also use the pick line tool and pick the interior face of that wall. Okay. The nice thing about that option is that we can actually continue it all the way around. So let's go to architecture, wall. Like so. Okay, so I know it's exactly the same. All right, I'm going to extend this all the way around, like so. Actually, no, I'm going to leave it the way it was. Okay, I'm going to draw I'll draw this piece here in just a few minutes. All right, so that looks good. Let's make sure this is up to our level 1. What? Oh, base constraint, sorry, should be ground floor, and top constraint should be level 1. Okay, so I'm gonna do just a couple more little components. I'm not gonna make you watch me draw all of these interior walls. Don't worry about the door. If you want to start with the doors, you can add doors today if you want. Don't worry about the ramp or the stair yet. We'll do that on a later day. But let's, before I let you guys, before we go to lunch, let's just look at one of these, maybe these curved walls right here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to Wall, Architectural, and I'm going to go down to Storefront. And I'm going to have to create a storefront assembly that matches what we know this looks like, okay? So I'm going to go to Edit Type. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to call this Storefront Ground Level 1, because I know there's going to be more than one. So I'm going to call that Storefront Ground Level 1, okay? So let's look at a picture real quick and kind of get an idea of what this is going to look like. Okay. Let's find a close-up. Okay, this is a good one. Okay, so if we look at this image here, you'll notice, you can barely see, you can notice that there's a mullion obviously on the bottom. There's a mullion probably about 3 feet up, and then the next one is all the way at the roof. Okay, and then all of the spacing of these mullions is relatively tight. You know, they're probably like a foot. All right, so using what we can see, let's create a storefront system that will match this assembly. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to my curtain wall storefront that I just created, and let's go and edit some of the different features. First is the mullions are probably not 2.5 inches thick. They're probably more like 1.5 inches thick. I think the mullions back then were relatively slim. Okay. So I'm going to select the 1.5 by 2.5 inch rectangular, okay? And I'm going to select those for all of them. You could probably argue that the bottoms and the tops are probably maybe a little bit larger, but for simplicity, I'm going to select 1.5 by 2.5 rectangular on all of them. Okay, so the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to establish a grid system. All right, so for the vertical grid, we know it's relatively tight. So I'm going to say fixed distance. I'm going to make that maybe, let's try 18 inches. It might actually be a little bit smaller. Let's see how that looks here in just a second. And then for the horizontal grid, I'm going to do, let's see. So we know there's one mullion at about 3 feet, and then we don't want one from there after. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this fixed distance, but I'm going to make this like 20 feet. I'm going to make it a number that's higher than what I know it actually needs to. Let's see. This is kind of a weird situation for this particular building, so I'm trying to think of what's the best way to do this. Let's try this. Okay, and then I'm going to go up to level 1. Oh, sorry. Base constraint is going to be ground level. Top constraint is going to be level 1. And then for my horizontal grid, I'm going to give it a 3-foot offset. So that's going to give me that first horizontal mullion that I'm looking for, and apply. Okay, so now we've created that storefront system. I'm going to use my pick line tool. Oop, I don't know if that'll actually let me pick that line. That's not one continuous line. So let's go ahead and do an arc from this point over to this point. This may actually need to be broken up into 2 arcs. Let's just see how this kind of comes together. And I'm going to select the middle. Ah, that worked out perfect. Looky there. All right, so let's just do that one more time. I'll just repeat that process. So I clicked on arc. I have my storefront system selected. I'm going to select the first point. I'm going to select the second point of where my storefront is going to end. And then I'm going to select the midpoint, okay, which is about right here. Okay? And there we have our storefront. Let's take a look at what this looks like in 3D. Oh, this is actually too high. That actually worked out. That's exactly what I want. Yeah, it needs to go down to 1. The base constraint should be ground floor, which I thought I'd selected that, but
I think when you deleted it, it changed on
so I'd say that looks pretty spot on. We could probably argue that spacing is probably, it might be even smaller than that. It could be like 14 inches or something. Maybe it's even a foot. Okay, so but regardless, it looks something about like that. Okay, so if you look at a few more pictures, yeah, I think that looks pretty good. And then you would just duplicate the same thing on the other side. Luckily, we have, you have a CAD file to trace over that kind of gives you the extents of all of the walls that you're going to be working with. All right, so the rest I will let you determine on your own. That kind of gives you all of the first steps to creating all of these different pieces. You'll need to create the green exterior wall type. You'll need to create your interior wall partitions. And then the goal is to finish all of the ground floor today, and the next class we'll move on to the upper couple levels. Any questions at all before we go to lunch? I know we're all hungry. No questions. Okay, let's pause there. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'll end the recording. That should give you